And what it's turned into be is this whole spiritual practice, because basically, since my byline is amplifying good, I am seeing good everywhere. And so every day when I sit down to write my blog, it's like, oh, well, there's this good, this good, this good, and this good, and this good, And so I'm owning whatever good seems the best to share at that moment. And it has been this wonderful practice, because now, because of that little discipline of, oh yeah, I put out a blog every day, I'm noticing all this good all over the place.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 23 of The Everything Enthusiast. I'm your host, Jennie O'Connor, and I write and create courses about mastering your mindset so you can stop settling for less, start asking for more, and finally do the thing that scares you. Like taking a leap by leaving a job that's soul-sucking to start an online business doing something you actually love. Exactly the kinds of things that we talk about on this show. If you are already subscribed, you are awesome. And if you are just tuning in for the first time, do be sure to hit subscribe, because I'm on a mission to bring you the tools and insights you need to get your beautiful creations out of your heads and into the light of day. And speaking of beautiful creations, I am regularly mind-boggled by my interview subjects, but today's guest just might be the most prolific creative person I have ever encountered. If you struggle to create consistently, Polly Castor will inspire you like nobody else can. Polly is a lifestyle blogger, Christian Science practitioner, artist, poet, photographer, writer, spiritual director, creativity coach, abstract art workshop instructor, speaker, veteran homeschooling mother, wife, vegetarian cook and recipe developer, thought leader, traveler, nature lover, reader, book reviewer, peacemaker, environmentalist, passionate about sustainability, and a former structural engineer. Whew. Once again, I am left breathless. So let's dig into how she has created such a fully integrated multimedia life, shall we? Hello, Polly. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. I am so glad to have you here. I actually wanted to give my audience a little bit of context for how we met. I was at an event looking for podcasting guests, and Polly's husband said to me, "You ought to speak to my wife." So I cyber stalked her naturally. And when I found her website, I was so smitten with her mission statement. So I want to read that to you. This is what she writes. "I work to amplify good wherever I find it. I love color, texture, beauty, great ideas, nature, metaphor, deliciousness, genuine spirituality, and exploring new territory. I encourage authenticity, nurture creativity, champion sustainability, promote peace, and hope to foster a new renaissance where we all are free to be our most fulfilled, multifaceted, and terrific selves." It's so beautiful. It so perfectly describes my own approach to life. And I'm a writer, Polly, and I'm not humble about it. I'm a good writer, and you said it better than I could have. So of course I had to meet you, and I'm just super excited to have you here today.
Yeah, it's lovely to be with like-minded people.
Absolutely. It's so fun kind of finding our tribe, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. They exist.
Yes.
In a world of specialization, it's like, yes, hallelujah.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. So I often start off my interviews asking my guests if their parents were multi-passionate people. But I noticed in a blog post that you wrote, your mom would often admonish you to stop chasing butterflies. So I take it that she was not an everything enthusiast.
Well, she was an artist herself, and she was an everything enthusiast in the sense that she gardened, and she was a stay-at-home mom, and she did all the things in that way. But I think she really knew that there was a specialization world out there, and my dad was totally a specialist, and he was the kingpin in our family. And I think she really wanted us to survive out in the world. And she knew that her tendency probably would have been to be a multi-passionate entrepreneur if she had had the opportunity. And I think she felt like we had to find a way in the real world, and that there was no place for that in the real world. And I rebelled against that.
Yeah. Well, good for you. And so that was really my follow-up question. How did you find the confidence? It's hard when you're not necessarily being supported, to forge your own way in spite of that.
I was not encouraged to go to art school because my mother had, and she felt undervalued, I think, taking that path, especially as a woman. And I could do math. And so they felt like, well, why would you go to art school if you can do math? And so I didn't want to be a math teacher and just passed on something for the next generation. And so I ended up feeling like, well, I'd rather put something into practice than actually be active and do something. So I went to engineering school, and the irony is I ran into all the same bias my mother had as a woman in art school way back in the day. And of course, I was one of 3 women of 5,000 in engineering school. And, it was just like, I wasn't, I did engineering for a long time, but engineering didn't feed my soul. So I had to keep doing other things because, when you're in something that's kind of soul sucking, you need to,
Yes.
do something else just to, keep yourself alive. And I was writing poetry and doing art and those kind of things all the way through. And anyway, all my deep thinking ended up, getting me out of engineering eventually.
Yeah. So you had these things that did feed your soul were on the side. They were hobbies the whole time.
I never didn't do those things.
Okay. Okay. But so
I had to do those things to survive trying to be the specialist. I tried, I really did. I couldn't do it. I couldn't only be this one little fragment of myself, and I try to encourage people not to be. I mean, if you think about it, we talk, the investors talk about diversifying your portfolio, right? Or I'm a cook. You wouldn't only, I mean, if you relied on my husband to cook for you, he'd give you, chicken and broccoli every night, It's not, you need a diversity of things in your diet. And why do we think our life is any different? I think one of the reasons people are so sad and lonely and frustrated basically is that there's all these facets of themselves they're not allowing to come out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. That's part of my mission with this podcast, is to help people get okay with living a life that pursues a lot of things in a specialist society, choosing not to go that route, because I feel like the people that are like us are designed in such a way that is just going to make you perpetually sad, because you're just not feeding those parts of yourself. So
right. And doing all those things make you happier. But really what I want people to get out of this podcast is it makes you more successful too. The real brilliant things. I mean, people talk about genius. Genius is when 2 disparate things are brought together. And how do you bring 2 disparate things? And if only one thing is in your life,
Yeah.
You have to have more input from across the board in order to do anything original. And I think that's one of the reasons we're all so stuck around. And there needs to be a bigger range of ideas because there needs to be a bigger range of cross sections.
Yes, 100%. So I was curious if the engineering was motivated by a desire to do something that would bring you success, that sort of traditional notion of like, this is a grown-up job.
Wasn't my desire particularly. I did want to be taken seriously. I've been a feminist since, the get-go. And I was never going to be in a position like my mother was in, where I had all these talents and skills and they were underutilized. So I wanted to be taken seriously. And, when you say you're going to engineering school as a girl back then, you're like, whoa, okay, you're taken seriously really quick. And that was the only good part about it, basically. Well,
good. I mean, there was a silver lining.
Silver lining.
Would you explain a little bit what the work entailed and also why you were kind of noteworthy in your industry?
Sure. I ended up doing structural engineering, and I liked the work because it was outside. I wasn't stuck in a cubicle, and it gave me more versatility that way. I didn't feel quite as trapped. I wouldn't have made it very long in an office, but I was climbing around on these buildings in New York City. I like to say I was propping up skyscrapers. That's like very layman's terms, but basically I would dangle from the top of the building. On the outside of the building, they would have gone before me to put a hole in the exterior of the building. I would hang down from the outside of the building and look at the steel to make sure the steel was okay. And then, of course, if it's not okay, I'm hanging from it. So let's get out of here, and I was noteworthy for several reasons. First of all, at the time in New York City, I was the only female engineer in the field.
I would
and
imagine.
So the whole construction industry, it was fascinating. I walked in and, there was all these big burly thugs kind of thing. And there was this culture of bribery. And, I was noteworthy partly because I didn't play the game their way. I didn't take the bribes. I didn't come in to the job scene and throw my weight around. That was kind of the way the engineers, the boss people would do it. I came in, frankly, again, as a woman. I came in and nurtured, and I came in and showed them how to do it. Oh, what amazing that my jobs came off under budget and in good shape, because I kind of, nurtured everyone along in the process. And, and then the other frankly reason is I was pregnant. I had went through multiple pregnancies hanging from those ropes. And so I had the first harness that wasn't around my waist, because I couldn't have it around my waist as a pregnant person. So, people on the sidewalk would be looking up, and there's this, is that a girl? And
pregnant lady dingling.
That's a pregnant girl. And so, yeah, so I was pretty obvious.
Wow. Yeah, I bet no one had any idea what to do with you. It's just, it's just miraculous. I think it's so interesting. So why did you ultimately leave that job?
I basically got to a place where there wasn't anything new. I was just repeating. And I also got to a place where I really saw that most of what I was accomplishing on the sites, whether it was with the co-op boards or whether it was with the laborers or whatever, is that I was really helping people put the lives together or whatever. It led directly into the ministry work that I'm doing. And because, supposedly I was there to fix the steel, but in order to fix the steel, I had to fix all the lives that surrounded the steel. And that was actually the part that was more satisfying. And I went to do that directly.
Interesting. And you called that spiritual healing?
Yes.
In spite of the fact that you had formerly been an atheist.
Yes. I was brought up doctor's daughter, very much, I was ahead of the game by never being, fed any of that malarkey, And in the process, I started asking some deep questions, because I think I'm made that way, but I had worked in the physics department, and I had, gotten into, I didn't believe in God because I thought matter was real. And more you get into quantum physics, the more you're wondering what is real. The table looks like it's solid, but if you get really close in there, it's a lot of stuff running around. And anyway, I started asking a lot of big questions, and I had some experiences, and I ended up started reading a whole bunch of stuff. I'm a reader. I still am. So, read a whole bunch of things. And anyway, long story short, I ended up reading a book called Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. And she defines God as life, truth, and love. And I was like, well, life, truth, and love. That sounds like the supreme to me. I mean, if you're going to have a God, love could be my God. That works, because what I realize is everybody has a God. Money could be your God, independence, or, anything can be your God. Right. So I realized that life, truth, and love, I really got that. That made complete sense to me. And when people say they're atheists to me now, I'm like, well, I believe in something. They don't call it God. I'm still a little uncomfortable with that word God, because it comes with so much baggage. But life, truth, and love, yeah, I'm 100% behind.
It's a great story, because it's just yet another one of your curiosities that you chased after, gave you this whole spiritual side that you might otherwise not have had. So
right. And I had a good upbringing. I'm not saying I didn't, but I challenged it every step of the way, and I challenged being an atheist, and I challenged whether I couldn't be an artist, and and the more you stand up to what life is asking you to think about, the better it is, I think.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. It's great. So switching gears a little bit, you really obviously have mastered the art of combining your interests, and you call it cross-pollination. You write in one of your posts, one thing often leads to something different. So it stands to reason that diversity of knowledge and experience will lead not only to creativity and inspiration, but also to success in any field. I feel like there needs to be a flag for multi-potentialites, and that needs to be on the flag because that's exactly where we excel is, you know, there's more creativity and more inspiration in our life because we are constantly connecting, you know, disparate dots that other people might not even sort of see connections between. So what I particularly love about this approach or this concept is that you do the cross-pollination thing both across disciplines and within disciplines.
That's right.
So can you speak to what that means to you?
Okay. Well, within disciplines, for example, I have pursued art this whole time, and I've gotten to where I'm doing a lot of it at this point. And so within art, I am not only pursuing different types of media, and when you paint in oil, it informs your painting in pastel, and which informs your painting in, you know, printmaking, and all that informs your collage, and you know, all those different media help you do the other media. That's kind of a within example. Another different within example is that I'm basically an abstract artist. I like painting ideas, and most people paint person, place, or thing, which are all nouns, but ideas are also nouns. And they, you know, a lot of people don't paint ideas, but I actually do paint ideas. So I'll think of an idea like confidence or something, and so how would you paint confidence? And then I paint confidence. So for example, cross ideas is all the spiritual thinking and all the metaphysical thinking that I've done leads into how I think about how to represent something abstractly. And another way across disciplines is with my blog. You didn't mention, but I've blogged every day for over 13 years.
That's literally my next question.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And that's a lot of photography. And I was doing photography long before I started the blog. And I'm so grateful for, you know, digital media, because we used to pay for prints and stuff. But what I learned, for example, in photography is, you know, I learned composition when it was really easy to learn it through photography. And, you know, watching people just start straight into art without that understanding of composition that came directly from photography. I can explain the principles of composition in art, but frankly, it's so much easier when you don't have, you're not creating something from, you know, on a blank piece of paper, but you're actually looking at a flower, and you can teach somebody, oh, well, how is it if the flower's here, or how is the flower, you know, which corner are you going to put the flower in? Is it, you know, how do you feel when the flower's in the middle? And so, you know, just playing with photography, you learn so much about composition, and that cross-pollinates directly into art. And so, you know, and right now I'm working on a project that's very exciting because the cross-pollination between the two bigger ends of what I'm really passionate about, which is the spirituality, not maybe most people's version of spirituality, but mine, and the art are really, really coming together, and in a way that I never even expected. And so it's just proof to your listeners that you can be running on these two parallel paths, or even they look like they're divergent even, and they'll come together if you just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things that I want to speak to about that. As you were talking, it made me think. I took some floral design classes for a while with absolutely no idea. I wasn't trying to be a florist. And then years later, I was working as a wedding planner, and a bride 10 minutes before she went down the aisle said to me, "I hate this bouquet, fix it." And I was like, and was able to call upon, I mean, I know those things do sound like they're sort of related, but I had never done one with the intent of like linking it to the other. And it is so interesting how you can pull in another field when you are someone who dabbles in all of these things. Or it's the reason I think that people say we're good at lots of things, because that there's just a little bit of like additional knowledge, because you had that knowledge of photography, then you can apply it to, you know, creating a painting with it. It all just makes sense. It's very validating to hear, you know.
Well, and think of if you're a novelist or something and you've never done anything or been anywhere or, you know, had any conversations, your novel's not going to be very good. You know, we're more interesting and we bring all those different facets to something, and we have more to draw from when we need an idea.
Yes,
and you
definitely.
had something to draw from when you needed to fix that bouquet.
Yeah, 100%. I like to say that I'm in multiple groups on Facebook for multi-passionate people, and they're very often, there's a lot of negative self-talk. And I always like to say we're the most interesting person at a cocktail party, you know?
Well, but that's not all.
No, but at its most basic level, like we can speak to so many different things, and I want to stand next to that person at a cocktail party.
I would say that we're healthier and happier and eventually more successful.
Once we shift that mindset, you know what I mean? You have to become okay. And it sounds like for you from a very early age, we're like, I'm going to do it this way, and I'm okay with that. For a lot of us, there was a huge amount of resistance and sort of self-loathing. So once we get past that, I agree completely. It's a more wholehearted living, you know?
One word I use a lot is authenticity. And I really, really like that word. And for me, it's a spiritual word, because we need to be what we were created to be. And I don't mean created by our parents. I mean, in a more cosmic, big sense. Who are we? Who are we made to be? And the world needs each of us to be all that we were made to be. And if you close off one part of you, no wonder we don't have world peace. Everybody's closing off part of you. We don't have all what we need to bring to the table to have the world work out. And so as each one of us is completely fulfilled and you bring all those facets to the table, I think that's how we will start to get along. And that's how we'll start to have solutions and be happy and make good choices and stuff. But as long as we're frustrated, I mean, talk about self-loathing. I think the real self-loathing people are the ones that are shut off and they felt like they had to and didn't have any choice. The ones that are at least trying to be true to themselves are on the path to finding happiness and being centered and being able to contribute what they are uniquely bring to the world.
Definitely. Yeah. It's one thing entirely to be a specialist because you're designed that way and that's how your mind works. And it's another thing to be a specialist because you didn't feel like you had any other choice. So
right.
Yeah, right. I completely agree with that.
And as a homeschooling mother, I had kids of different learning styles, for example. And so I had some linear thinkers, and that's your specialist type of person, you know, that one thing comes after another. And my daughter, who's more like me, is they call it hold aparts. So, you know, you need to see the whole thing first, and then you have all these different parts. And it's very much not linear thinking. And they're both, you know, very valid. And so I'm not here to beat up the linear thinkers. I'm just saying they shouldn't dictate to us. And most of the schools are designed for linear thinkers. And it's really unfortunate. And I was underserved in school, and I know my daughter would have been. And whereas, you know, we're just as valid. We just have a different skill set to bring. And I know people, linear thinkers, that have a real hard time having a bunch of balls in the air as a juggler, you know, but for us, that juggling brings us alive and makes us better. And
absolutely. And that's our area of genius, our wheelhouse. Yes. Yeah, I agree. So you have 3 kids, right?
I have 3 children. Yes.
And only one is an everything enthusiast.
Well, it's not fair to say the other 2 have had perfect permission to explore other things.
Oh, of course.
They have more traditional career goals that are more defined and direct. And then everything else is a hobby. They're still certainly doing those other things.
Okay.
and loving those other things. And I've always had permission to do those other things, but it's very different than feeling like you want to do all the things all the time, you know. And it's really something that you've got to solve. And it starts with permission and realizing that maybe life, truth, and love made you that way. Maybe, you know, maybe that's who you should be instead of fighting who you should be.
Yeah. Yes. That's the call out from this episode. What you just said. It's beautiful. Yeah. So permission, I think, is the first piece. Absolutely. But then do you think people like us need structure? It sounds counterintuitive.
I have a funny story about structure. Since you mentioned children, I'm thinking of it. As a more artistic type, discipline is not really my strong suit, even though I kept those, I kept those construction sites on schedule. That was fine. That was my job. But for myself, it's kind of like, oh, what do I feel like doing right now? What I feel like eating right now? I mean, it's a moving target all the time.
Yes.
And anyway, I had children. I had no idea how to raise children. And we actually had this book, you know, we opened the book to find out what to do next, you know. And anyway, it had a kind of a structure for the kids' day and a nap times and stuff. And you know, you feed the kid and then you change the diaper and then you put them down, you know, it's kind of little routines. And since they didn't know what else to do, we did this with our children, and they were very, very happy with that. And then I saw the beauty and the freedom in that, because then we knew when we could take them out. We knew when they were going to be good, you know, because they had everything they needed. They had, you know, their nap and their bottle and their whatever. And anyhow, I saw the freedom in that. And I thought, okay, I always thought that structure meant no freedom. I thought structure meant I need to rebel, you know. And
Yeah.
I saw that, wow, discipline gives freedom. And so then the next part of that trajectory was, I was not, as a young mother and a full-time working person, I wasn't getting enough art in my life, and that was not okay. I do much better if I get art regularly in my life, and everyone in my life will tell you if she hasn't done that, it's not a good thing. And anyway, so I started my own version of discipline for myself, and I started doing a little journal where I would paint a 4-inch square thing a day. And that made all the difference. I called it a box a day. It was literally 4 inches square in this little art journal, one little 4-inch square a day. And it was fabulous. And that actually is what led to the blog, because I felt this divine nudge to do this blog, and I ignored it. And I was nudged and I ignored it. And I'm very perceptive, and I kept getting this nudge. And I was like, first, who would care? And secondly, daily, really, I'd run out of something to say, right? And but I had this experience with these kids that discipline equals blessing, you know, and discipline not being natural at all, you know. But then I had done these little, you know, little paintings, and that had been such a blessing. So I thought, okay, you know, I'm getting this nudge. I don't know who cares and why I'm doing this, but I'm just going to start, and I'm just going to do it. And what it's turned into be is this whole spiritual practice, because basically, since my byline is amplifying good, I am seeing good everywhere. And so every day when I sit down to write my blog, it's like, oh, well, there's this good, this good, this good, and this good, and this good, you know? And so I'm owning whatever good seems the best to share at that moment. And it has been this wonderful practice, because now, because of that little discipline of, oh yeah, I put out a blog every day, I'm noticing all this good all over the place. And I'm taking pictures of the, you know, the beautiful light coming through the trees on my walk, or whatever it is. I have reasons to notice the good. And so with the noticing of that good, then that cross-pollinates into, wow, maybe I'll paint that way the light came through the trees. And then you know, then I'm encouraging my clients to see the light coming through the trees, and it's all part and parcel of the same thing. But it came from this little idea of this little blog that, yes, is blessing all sorts of other people, but really it's just that one kind of thing. I mean, we eat meals regularly. I put out a blog regularly. I don't do a whole lot else regularly, honestly. I mean, I answer the phone regularly, whatever, uh, but I think in certain places it's really good to have a routine.
Yeah. Wow. So it's a gratitude practice, the blogging.
It's a gratitude practice. Totally.
I think that's brilliant. I was going to say, how do you stay inspired? But I mean, if you can find something to be grateful for every day, that's
and I actually, approximately once a month, I actually do have a gratitude list. I keep a gratitude list that I call them grace notes. So you can go on my blog and see month by month grace notes of the things I was grateful for. And, I'm teaching people to be grateful for the wrapper on the bread. I mean, there's so much good out there that we don't even, notice. But when you start to notice it, life is very exciting. And why would you shut off any of that?
Yeah.
And the more you let all that in, the more it can bounce around and cross-pollinate with everything else.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. It resonates so much with me in several of the blog posts that I've written. Like one of them is to aspire every day to do something beautiful, something funny, and something delicious.
Oh, there you go. We get along.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you make that your motivation, like you're going to have an amazing day. And so this is, but the notion of doing it every day is mind boggling to me. Do you do it at a set time?
Like I said, no, not really. I mean, okay. I pretty much blog in the morning, first thing in the morning. I definitely put out my blog first thing in the morning. That's the habit I'm currently in. But when I started, I was doing it in the evening. I had still had kids at home, and after they were in bed, I would do it. So it has morphed over the time to what it is now. And then like last weekend, I went on a plein air painting retreat for 5 days. And so I blogged in advance, but most of the time I'm blogging in real time. And sometimes even on trips, I'm blogging in real time. So it just depends.
So when you blog in advance, you're doing 2, maybe 3 in a day.
Well, but I also know that that's coming up. Okay. And I'll, when I have a morning where I'm just overflowing with more than one thing, I'll just throw the other thing in.
Oh, wow. It's incredible. I've heard of people who do this, who blog every day. And I'm like, that's not real.
Yeah. Well, it is. It is
amazing. But I think as of late, we were talking about this before we started recording, like the podcast has sort of taken over my world, and I have felt less inspired to do my blog posts, but I really love the notion of looking around for what it is that you're grateful for and using that as your inspiration.
Well, and if something's blessing you, maybe you could share the blessing, and instead of it's just, because that's like you said, make something delicious. I have, for your listeners, so they know, I have different topics. I call it a lifestyle blog, which is really an anomaly because I'm not like an influencer type that I'm selling, clothing or something, makeup or something. No, yeah, I'm selling an outlook on life, which I'm not selling anything, but I'm promoting an outlook on life that is full of joy and full of beauty and full of wisdom and full of authenticity and creativity. That's what I care about. And so, like if I have I made a great recipe, I just recently made strawberry salsa. It was fabulous.
Ooh, is that somewhere I can find?
Yes, it is. Recently on the blog. Okay. So I have these topics that they are art, photography, spirituality, ideas, books, movies, food, poetry, and hope. So if you sign up for my blog daily, you're going to get something like that, and you might enjoy it. Actually, I encourage your listeners to subscribe to my blog. And I tell people, I know it's a lot. I know it's every day. I do it. I know it's every day.
Yeah, it's more work for me than it is for you.
So the point is, I don't expect everybody to read everything. I say in the subject line what it is. So if you're not a cook and you don't care about strawberry salsa, you won't open it that day. And maybe you're not a reader, because I do book reviews and stuff. So maybe you don't care about the book review or something. And, I write poems, and some people love poems, and maybe, I don't know who doesn't like poems, but the point is you can open what you want, but you can always, I think people really enjoy first thing in the morning having something good in their inbox. Yeah. And it's just, and the thing is, it's not always the same. I've had hugely diverse posts about things. I mean, literally,
yeah. Yeah, no, you're speaking my language. I was a private chef for many years to people with food allergies, and I would love to incorporate a food element into my website, my blog, and that kind of thing. But I haven't really felt like it went together. You just showed me that that's not true.
In this specialist world, I don't think Google knows what to do with me because I have this colossal blog, but it's not about one thing. I mean, it's an example how the specialist world leaks into our life and kind of screws it up. I mean, I would, I'm never going to be the Food Network because I don't only do food. You see these food bloggers that it explodes because that's all they're doing, or fill in the blank, any of the above. But what I realize though more is that people need permission. They need to realize that doing all these different things is what makes somebody thrive. Because if nothing else, you can tell that I'm thriving on this blog. I mean, it's like, yay, look what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
And it's not about me. Oh, yay, I'm doing it. It's that we have this beautiful creation to play in, and we can, reflect all that creativity in our life in all sorts of ways. And I'm hoping that it encourages people to realize that they can not be pigeonholed in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that enthusiasm is contagious, and you're so clearly enthusiastic about each of these different things that you each of these cookie jars that you have your hands in, that really translates. It's great.
I'll give you another example. I mentioned briefly that I had homeschooled my children. We homeschooled them all the way through high school. When I made the switch out of engineering, they were in a private school that switch out no longer afforded. And it was such, again, a blessing, because I got to know my kids in a way I wouldn't have. But I knew a lot of homeschooling mothers that were burnt out. And I knew a lot of full-time working mothers that were burnt out. And somehow I was homeschooling, a full-time homeschooling mother and a full-time working mother, and I was thriving. Now, I think that, partly the problem is that, people get it just locked into one thing, because I had a life outside of my kids, which the homeschooling mothers that are only doing that really didn't. They were kind of like completely absorbed in that situation. And then you have these other people who were, working all the time, but never with their kids, and they were missing out on that score. And see, for me, I would either be with my kids, and when then I got to go be a grown up in my work life venue. And so they both played off of each other in a way that I was refreshed. And I think that people think it's not like I don't espouse being busy, but I do.
No.
I do believe in doing meaningful things, and being with my kids was meaningful, and the work that I was doing was meaningful, and they were so different that I was in the process, I was refreshed, especially once I figured out I could do this much art a day. So.
Yeah. And so in addition to those two things, working full-time and homeschooling full-time, you were still doing art stuff on the side as well.
Yes, I was. And so once the homeschooling stuff, once I graduated and have moved on to all be very successful, thank you very much. The art just filled the space that that the homeschooling was taking. And so now it looks like I have these two careers. I have this spiritual career and I have this art career. And that's what's so fun about my new venture, because those two are coming together.
Yeah. Can you, reveal a little bit more about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll tell you a little story about how it all happened, because that's the easiest way. I mean, basically, I'm like a pastoral minister, and it's called a Christian Science practitioner. And people call me, I get paid directly by the client, and not by the church. And people call me with all sorts of crises or concerns or problems or unhappinesses or whatever it is. And I talk them through it and out of it. And we there's an element of prayer and all that kind of stuff. So I explain, how I think, a better perspective on maybe spiritual way to look at it might be for them. Anyway, so I'm in this Ridgefield Clergy Association here as representing our church. And there's another lady in there, a minister who is at the Congregational Church, and she offered me to have a art show in her church. And so I had 89 paintings of the January of 2020. I had a one woman show opening in her church and of 2 floors. I was, paintings everywhere. Big show. So we're there to hang up the show. And I'm putting up a painting called Epiphany. And she comes over and she says, "That's Epiphany." And I'm like, yeah, that's Epiphany. And so I had picked the paintings that were really more a cross section between art and spirituality because I was putting them in the church. And she says, no, you don't understand. And since it was January, it was during Epiphany, she ran in her office and she brought me back her program where it had a picture of Epiphany on it, which was frankly brown and not very indicative of Epiphany. And she says, "That's not Epiphany." And I said, "You're right, that's not Epiphany." She says, "I want your art on my program." I'm like, oh, I mean, we like to say in our family that activity begets activity. If I hadn't been painting, if I hadn't been a member of the clergy association, if I hadn't been doing all these different things, I wouldn't be in a place where the little light bulb went off and somebody basically told me what I should do. And I was like, oh, and turns out that she has a subscription to have, paintings on her program. And she wasn't very inspired by the options. And so I left there and I did some research and I felt like she was right. There was certainly room for me in that. So we are in the process of putting together a website. Unfortunately, we thought we were going to get somebody else to build the website, but don't you know that the cheapest bid came in for a colossal amount of money, which we now understand why. And so this last year, we've built this website ourselves, which we're clueless about, but we're doing it anyway. And long story short, I'm doing an art imaging website that it's called contemporaryspiritualart.com. And so the whole spiritual side of me and the whole art side of me are coming together to meet a need that, interestingly enough, my church doesn't have bulletins. We don't even use this. So it's for other people. It's not, I wouldn't have thought of it for myself. But here these two things are coming together. And as I build this website, which is just coming out this summer, it's being launched soon. I really see that, there has been a common ground the whole time. It was basically me, the way I see things. But as I put up this conceptual art that I've done, that I have paintings of all sorts of things that are completely relevant to yoga studios or interfaith places of all varieties. It's not they're not like one faith tradition kind of thing. They're really accessible to anybody that wants to use these things over a really wide variety of uses. So, amazing. And then my daughter through COVID ended up using one of my paintings as her Zoom background. And so there'll be Zoom backgrounds and then there'll be, desktop savers and, all this kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh. So it's a stock imagery site, but the imagery is art.
But it's art and not photography. Yes.
I'm amazed that you came up with that's not a thing, That's incredible.
Anyway, so and it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where the market of that is. And as somebody who's done a lot of one-woman shows, it's expensive to frame all your artwork and it's a big deal to hang it, and this big thrust for this one moment. And I have been doing better, frankly, selling. You can find my art if you want to look at it on pollycastorart.com. I'm selling art just fine off my website where you don't really have to frame it all. So this is another way for me to keep doing what I want to do anyway, but that it actually adds up to something for somebody else.
Yeah.
I still remember my mother stopping painting at some point because she's like, well, why? I mean, it's just stacking up in the basement kind of thing. And I remember as a kid, well, I'm never going to feel that way. And here I am, I can see that this is going to be an ongoing thing. I'll just keep adding the new paintings and there'll be fresh stock in there all the time. And anyway, just recently last week, I went to the Clergy Association and told them I was doing this and they were all over it. So,
how cool.
All the different religious traditions were, yeah, we'd use that. We'll tell everybody. So
And I like that it's, it appeals to all. It's not like rigidly, Christian. It could be, all the yoga studios, like you said, that's
Well,
probably.
we made 3 categories, and one category is concepts, which is really the strength of my art, I feel like. And then there's wisdom traditions, and I've painted Sufi poems. I mean, there's a big wide range of wisdom traditions in there. And then the other one is nature, because I just love nature.
Oh, it's wonderful. I cannot wait to check it out. How great.
Well, it's not quite ready yet, but it will be by the time you put this out, I think.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll time it. We'll time it just to get it right. So I want to ask you a question, and you may have already answered it, but I want to give you an opportunity to kind of bring it full circle. You write that your goal is to be a whole-souled woman. Brené Brown talks about living a wholehearted life, and that really resonates with me. So what do you think it means to be whole-souled? Is it just what you've been talking about up to this point, or is there a bit more to it?
I think it's it's pretty much what we've been talking about. That sense of authenticity that includes all the facets that I've been gifted with. And everybody's gifted with a huge range of facets. One of the things that I talk to my clients about is, I make them make a list of qualities and attributes of God, the way they think of God, and what are all the qualities and attributes of God. And one of the first things that says in the Bible is that we're made in God's image and likeness. So if you can make a list of, I asked them to make 300. I've got 1,200. And the point is, if I'm the image and likeness of those 1,200 qualities and attributes, then that's me exemplifying and manifesting and expressing all those qualities and attributes. That's me being whole-souled. Yeah. Because if soul is my version of God, right? Then all those qualities and attributes that define God as soul or life or truth or love or mind or principle or source, or then that's how I know who I am. So it's not like I'm making myself. I was already made. I'm discovering who I am and what I can do and what I'm supposed to do. And, I'm really more being obedient to reflecting all those qualities and attributes. So for me, being whole-souled, that's how I would think of it.
I love it. I think it's Julia Cameron that says the act of creating is to not engage in the act of creating is to go against what our purpose here is. And so it really is embracing all of the things that call to you in terms of creation and doing them. It's beautiful. I love it. So you have a long list of places where people can find you, and I'm going to drop all of those links into the show notes. Good. But if you would like to say it so that people who might be driving in their car know how they can track down your art, learn more about you, find your blog, all that stuff.
Okay. Well, first of all, the daily blog that you're very welcome to subscribe to and have in your inbox every is pollycastor.com. And that's spelled POLLYCASTOR.com. And my original paintings are available for sale on pollycastorart.com. And the future site of my downloadable images is Contemporary Spiritual Art. Then you can also find me on Instagram at Polly Castor. And I'm also, my food is on Instagram at Whole30 Pescatarian. I've been either a vegetarian or pescatarian for the last 40 years. And I've found that a lot of people get in a real rut with that. And again, food is a great way to be creative, and there's no reason to be in a rut, even if you're trying to eat in a sustainable way for the environment. So.
Absolutely. And we didn't even get to talk about food. I could easily keep you on this call for hours, but I promise to keep it under an hour. So you are absolutely an inspiration, Polly. I'm so glad that we were connected and had a chance to talk today. Thank you for being here.
It's been lovely. I loved it.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I'm going to sign up for your blog. I am going to start following you on Instagram. I look forward to seeing all that you continue to produce.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I will talk to you soon.
Okay.
You guys, did you love her? I want to paint a box a day. I wish I could bottle her no-nonsense manner of doing things her way, fully in her authenticity. I really hope you guys got some fab takeaways from this episode. And be sure to sign up for Polly's blog. Believe me, I am not a big fan of more in my inbox, but the posts that I've read so far are short and sweet and just a tasty, tiny morsel of beauty you can add to your day. Please also be sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you like what you're hearing, might I talk you into a teensy little review? Reviews help my show get found in the sea of other podcasts. I would be eternally grateful. Also, please come connect with me on Facebook and Instagram where we can keep the conversation going. I'm at Your Creative Fairy Godmother. And as always, thanks for hanging out with me, and I can't wait to talk to you on the next episode. Bye for now.